This morning, the existential threat facing Texas that no one seems to be talking about. It's water. There's either too much of it or not enough. State Senator Charles Perry on solutions that he's going to discuss in Austin this week. Should Texas kids start school in September? A Republican lawmaker says doing so would take pressure off the electric grid during the height of summer. One of the issues that we have for State Rep Jared Patterson. Insight this morning from a high-dollar Democratic fundraiser in Texas. Erica Barrera raises millions of dollars for candidates and campaigns. But what group does not donate? And who do Democrats really want to? Plus, Attorney General Ken Paxton's investigation of ballots in South Texas. Governor Abbott says Texas will not tolerate any illegal voting, but what's the evidence? And what's this really all about?
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning. I'm Jason Whiteley. It is the 1st of September here. Let's start the program with the top political headlines happening here in our state. Texas needs more than 300,000 new homes just to make housing more affordable in this state. Texas Comptroller Glenn Hager out with his new 26-page report the other day. The problem, he says, is simple. Texas spent years luring new businesses to Texas, but did not build enough homes for all of the workers who came with them. 1985 was the last time Texas housing was this unaffordable. Governor Abbott says a law he signed removed 1 million names off the Texas voter rolls, but what the governor did not tell you is that the Texas counties which manage elections already removed dead voters, felons, and the like. They have for years. State and federal law already requires it. But removing 6,500, quote, non-citizens is causing some concern. The last time Texas tried to do that, the state actually discovered many of them were naturalized citizens. And in case you missed it, the what were you thinking moment of the week. Dallas is trying to recruit a brand new city manager, and the Frisco firm that Dallas hired to do that created a brochure that put the Houston skyline on the cover. That was only a draft copy. It didn't go out, but the mistake still drew a lot of attention. A Texas Republican floated an idea the other day that drew some sharp reaction. He said Texas children should start school in September. Doing so, he says, would take pressure off the electric grid to cool classrooms during the heat of August. And that's where we started with State Rep Jared Patterson, a Republican who represents Frisco and part of Denton County. Representative, welcome to the program here. You've ruffled a lot of feathers with this proposal you have about starting school in September.
Yes.
Where did this come from?
Well, you know, this just came from, I'm a public school parent. I've got 3 kids in Frisco public schools. I talked to a lot of other parents. And the bottom line is I think our parents had it right starting school after Labor Day. We cooled down some of the largest buildings in most communities across the state of Texas during the hottest month of the year, which costs more money, puts more of a strain on the grid. And then in addition to that, you've got kids playing on playground equipment that's too hot to touch. You've got football players and band members practicing in excruciating heat. We can push things back just a few weeks and make life better for Texas school children.
You plan to introduce a bill?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Do you think you'll have support on that?
I think so. I think this is a bipartisan, common sense issue that we can get done in the Texas House, and we'll see where it goes.
Representative, the SCOPE Act, which you were a joint author on, is supposed to take effect today. It's still tied up in court, though. It requires anyone under 18 to get permission from parents in order to sign up for an account online, social media, and things like that. Explain how that will work, because there are so many tech-savvy teenagers who can find workarounds to almost anything.
Yeah, look, I'm so excited to be here to talk about the SCOPE Act because I'm so passionate about protecting our kids online. You might recall I made international headlines a couple of years ago when I said that we're going to ban all minors from social media.
I remember that.
You know, we have a mental health crisis in this state. We have more kids killing themselves than at any point in our history. And so last session, Speaker Phelan generated this bill, made it a speaker priority bill to make sure that we can go over and protect our kids online. It's held up in the courts right now. But I'm hopeful that it will take effect because these minors need to be protected from the dangerous situation that is right at their fingertips.
Explain how it will work, though. Do my kids need to have my permission to sign on? Why can't they figure out a way around this?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and I think that every application is going to be different. We're looking at legislation to kind of bolster the SCOPE Act next session that's passed in other states like Tennessee that would require parental approval in the App Store even. So depending on whether you're online on a computer, on your device, it could be different depending on where you are. The bottom line is the SCOPE Act also protects kids from these algorithms that take them down these scary rabbit holes. It protects data privacy for minors who, again, can't sign a contract. They're signing up for a set of terms that they can't even agree to legally. So it's a robust bill that's going to protect our minors.
Let's talk politics in the House here. Speaker Phelan hired a political veteran down in Austin, Mike Toomey, to be his new chief of staff. What message does that send? Because we all watched the relationship between the House and the Senate last year.
Well, Mike Toomey is the guy that is brought in when something big needs to happen. He's been a chief of staff for 2 governors. Governor Abbott brought him in on the COVID-19 situation to lead our response to that effort a few years ago. He is one of the brightest, most strategic minds in Austin. And I think what it shows is that we are serious about doing the business of the people in the state of Texas, that we're going to work across party lines. We're going to work across the hall down with the Senate. We're going to work with the governor's office. And we're building the right team to do that. You might have seen he hit the ground running with an announcement that we're already working on school choice. We're not going to wait until January. We're already working on how to better our economy and keep it the miracle that it is in the United States. So we're blowing and going. We hit the ground running, and Mike Toomey is the man for the job.
One of Phelan's priorities is improving education with a strong focus on school choice and education funding.
Yes.
What do you think we're going to see next session? Are there going to be standalone school vouchers, or will there also be a boost for public education as well?
Well, that remains to be seen, but I think we have to do both. Whether it's in the same bill or not, we have to do both. If you look at what we had before us in the last special session last year, it was a massive increase in public education funding, more money for teacher pay, but it also allowed 50,000 students out of the 5.5 million students that are SPED students, that are 504 students that are in failing schools, to go out and choose a different educational system if that's what they need for their family. When that got stripped out of the bill, everything kind of died. That's probably where we're going to pick up now with how do we better fund our public schools, how do we better protect our teachers and their funding, but also how do we give those students the opportunity to choose a different system if that's what they need for their families.
Representative, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's bring in the roundtable to talk about the politics of this. Bud Kennedy is here from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Ian Mitra is with us from Austin at the Texas Tribune. Bernadine Steptoe, political producer at WFAA in Dallas. Bud, parents' ears clearly perked up there. Would Texas really push back the start date of schools by several weeks?
They talk about this every few years. It's been talked about in the past. The Six Flags lobbied for it. The Schlitterbahn, all the amusement parks want it. Also, is supposed to help Latino children who go home. They may have families from Mexico. They may go home, not come back until after Labor Day. But the suburban schools always want long breaks. They like that long August.
Bernadine?
I think that's one of the most important considerations. How would it affect the breaks? Because I think the breaks at this point are figured in with that start and end date.
And this does come up every so often, as Bud mentioned there. Is there any more fuel behind it now with the grid influx?
Well, and certainly, the representative wasn't saying that this was a silver bullet that was going to kind of have this magical fix to it, but also it's just kind of, it's an interesting concept because it does address this, but also, other energy experts like Doug Lewin have told KView that, there's a bigger aspect of discussion about the whole aspect of the grid and efficiency and looking more wholeheartedly in this at the issue. So that's going to be something that's going to continue to be part of the debate as well.
Yeah, just part of the conversation will start peeling back as the legislature creeps closer and closer on the calendar. Guys, thanks so much. We'll be right back in just a moment. Welcome back to Inside Texas Politics. Let's discuss money for a moment here. It's the heartbeat of any campaign, and Democrats this year are breaking records, at least on the national level. Our next guest is helping them do it. Erica Barrera is a political fundraiser in Texas, and she's speaking at the Women's Summit in Dallas this coming weekend. Erica, welcome to the program here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about this massive haul that the Harris-Walz campaign has brought in. What's your reaction to that? Because it's something we haven't seen.
$540 million in the course of 5 weeks is just unprecedented. And I just think that speaks to the enthusiasm there is for this campaign. And our job now in these less than 70 days is to translate that money into votes on November 5th.
And how do you do that? Because that's the question that candidates and campaigns have all the time. How do you turn money into actual votes?
It's sustaining that enthusiasm, right? And when you're at those rallies, it's making sure folks are registered. It's making sure you have their contact information so that we're following up with them constantly as soon as early voting starts up until November 5th.
Which slice of the populace gives money? Which slice does not?
That's an interesting question. I would say that you're seeing an uptick actually in Black donors because since Obama, they've become more engaged. And I think that speaks to representation. Yeah. And I'm going to say that for two reasons. So representation in that I'm seeing somebody that looks like me, but also representation in people that are speaking to where I align ideologically. So I would say, obviously we can get into there's a wealth gap, so it's not as, there's the parity that exists there. But I would say you're seeing an uptick in Black donations, especially now that we have Vice President Harris at the top of the ticket.
Who doesn't give, though?
If you don't have the resources, right, it's a lot harder to give. But
is there one slice of the populace that you really like to tap into? Or?
You know what? What I would really like to tap into are the younger generation. Because my thing is if you can buy a Beyonce ticket, you can buy a Taylor Swift ticket. If you can buy, a Drake ticket, you can put money towards your candidate of choice. And I want people, for money, I want them to think of it as an investment. Just like you put away money for college, you put away money for retirement, you have to invest in who your electeds are because that's your future. And so, that's my job of selling that to people and telling them why it's important to be engaged politically, not when, my rights are being taken away, but from the beginning, you need to have that investment.
2 months left before Election Day.
Yeah.
What are you going to be watching for when it comes to money?
It's a money game, right? You have to have money in order to run the campaign. That was really, I think, the tough pill for President Biden to have to deal with of the money was drying up, and the unfortunate truth is you need money to be able to run the campaign, to pay the staff, to put your message out on air. And so I'm just going to be watching, the Harris campaign and the Trump campaign to see what the numbers look like. And hopefully speaking things into existence, but Vice President Harris is able to sustain the level or continue to see, because she's kind of seen it go like this, for it to continue to go that way over the last 2 months. But it's a mad dash until the end. I mean, Labor Day is when it's just the sprint to the finish.
It all kicks in then. Erica, thanks so much for the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Water is an existential problem for our state. There's either too much of it during flooding events or not enough for the future. State Senator Charles Perry chairs the Senate Committee on Water, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs. And he took our call in Lubbock after we found out how much the state's new flood plan is going to cost.
Senator Perry, welcome to the program. The state flood plan could cost this state and taxpayers up to $54 billion. When you look at that and zoom out for a moment, where do you start on that? What's paramount? And how much do you think that lawmakers are actually going to spend when they return to Austin in January?
These big projects, you're not going to get them funded, nor could there be enough vendors. If we had a $54 billion check today and we put it into the Texas economy, there's not enough vendors in the world to come into Texas to build out that infrastructure. So you kind of do the best you can with this, what you got and what the budget gives. We don't judge this budget in Texas. We don't print money. And we have a vision of how to kind of stretch those dollars. But we will, I believe, confidently can say, always put enough money in there to keep the pipelines going, because these are decade projects in some instances. So vendors need to know with certainty that they're going to get paid, not with a conversation every 2 years, but with a conversation over a 10-year period, if you will.
The state flood plan also proposes preventing future risk, and some of the ideas there are changing building standards or not allowing new buildings in flood-prone areas. That would drastically impact places like Houston, Galveston, Corpus Christi, Beaumont, Port Arthur, even down in the Rio Grande Valley. Is that something, these new building standards, something that the state might enact, do you think?
I don't know that we'll enact them. Here's the deal. You shouldn't build buildings in a known floodplain. You just shouldn't. I think that what you'll find is the insurability of developments and homeowners in those will become the governor for not developing, because if you have a mortgage, you got to be insured. And if you're in a floodplain and you can't get flood insurance, mortgage companies are going to sing up. So I think there's some free market pressures that are going to have that. But the truth of the matter is most of that Harris County flooding is in areas that have been built in for decades.
Senator, how much of the state flood plan is an acknowledgement on the right that the weather is changing in this state, in this country, on this planet?
I don't, the political words, right? Climate change, global warming and stuff. Here's the deal. Our climate changes every day. I acknowledge climate's changed since me and you've been talking. It'll be warmer or colder before I leave here today because climate's changing. The long-term impact of that, it's just seasons change. Our jet stream has changed out here. It just has. In my 63 years, our weather patterns have shifted different. And it's just going to happen. That's been the evolution of time.
Let me ask you about the other side of water. There are urban areas in this state, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, Houston. They don't have enough water to, maintain and sustain the current amount of growth they have. And there's been a lot of debate about when and where to put new reservoirs to sustain all this growth. What is the state doing to try to get ahead? Because this is an issue that's fast approaching these areas in the state that's not really being addressed publicly, it seems like.
Yeah, I think it's fixing to get addressed publicly based on my efforts. I mean, it's just time. It's time to have an open, honest, transparent conversation about water supply in Texas to meet the population and the industry groups. Here's the good news. We need 10 to 12 million acre feet. I have, through study, figured out that there's about 100 million of potential acre feet per year to develop that's not been developed. And realistically, about 50% of that, 50 million acre feet, that we can do economically.
What's that going to cost, do you think, Senator?
I'm getting it costed out as we speak. We don't have to eat this elephant all today, but there are industry segments questioning whether we're going to have water. There are cities that are literally at 25% of capacity that are $300 million ports per day activity that we've got to address. So it's time to do that. It's like we've got a water plan. It needs to be updated to 2025.
Senator, we'll stay in touch. I appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you, sir.
The roundtable is ready when we come back here on Inside Texas Politics. All right, time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Bud, Ian, and Bernadine are back with us. And Bud, let's start with the big Harris-Walz interview, the very first one they gave to CNN. First reaction to that. Did it help her? Did it change anything?
This was the kind of interview that we normally would have been having a year ago with a candidate. A lot of introductory, a lot of soft stuff, a lot of discussion of what she said in the past, checking her about what she did and said. She needs to get on to what she's going to do and what she's going to say.
And Ian, that was my reaction as well. This seemed like a softball interview to me.
I think we all probably would agree that we would have liked to have heard a little bit more specifics on policies and stuff. But look, what was she trying to do with this thing? I mean, from her campaign standpoint, they were trying to assure, Democrats who may have been, kind of faltering on their support of the campaign, they're, Democrat-leaning independents. They wanted to assure them that she was in a position to reassure them that she was the candidate moving forward, and they didn't necessarily hurt themselves in that regard. So that for them, that in that way, it was a win.
And Bernadine, when I asked Ian the question, I saw you roll your eyes. Was it not? I mean, it was a softball interview, but it was an introductory interview as well, too. I understand that.
I think that she answered the questions that she was given. And but what I wanted to see is I wanted to hear more new news, because the only thing that came out of that interview was the fact that she's going to appoint a Republican to the cabinet. But most of the interview was addressing what her opponents was throwing at her. And I must say, before we get off this, I think that what she did was very shrewd, is she put that race issue to rest. Because when they asked her about when did she become black and all of that, she moved on. Yeah. And I think that was smart, because when you deal with race, you rarely win.
Yeah, there were some other questions could have moved on from, but the main thing too is that I listened to it mostly on audio. Is much better listening to it than watching it. The lighting wasn't good. She kept looking down. She needs to improve and be a prosecutor. Talk to the jury.
And she has that experience,
now,
clearly.
You can't blame her for lighting. She doesn't light her
Right.
interviews.
That was the company CNN that physically did that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about this General Paxton investigation of ballots down in the Rio Grande Valley. Governor Abbott saying we're not going to tolerate any illegal voting here. Well, what's the evidence in the reporting that you guys have done at the Texas Tribune?
Well, when Attorney General Paxton kind of announced this vote harvesting investigation, looking at counties including Frio, Atascosa, and Bexar, they were looking at potential things around potential vote harvesting, gathering of it, which would be illegal. They didn't provide a lot of specifics about the investigation. They said that could come, but what it has done is kind of raise a lot of concerns there about potential suppression. Whether it's particularly among Latino officials and Latino voters there. There's voting rights groups are already asking for federal and state reviews of this because there's a concern that this could cause more trouble and uncertainty and fear as we get closer to early voting.
And Bud, is that what this is about? On the surface, it certainly seems so.
It's about the election. This is an investigation that started in 2022. They've done more investigating in 2023. They just happened to bring it up right before the election, right on schedule. 6 years ago, the last time Ted Cruz was on, the same thing. They rattled around Tarrant County, arrested 4 people, challenged 29 ballots. After the election, they dropped it all.
Right on schedule, Bernadine.
Just another point of, people could view it as voter suppression. It's nothing but voter suppression because they don't find anything when they launch these investigations, anything of significance.
But does this really keep people from going to the polls? Does it really stop minority voters from going out?
Well, it could put a level of fear because remember, who wants to be arrested or go through any kind of legal situation based on their will to vote? So sometimes they just don't go, especially if you think that you're going to be challenged and inevitably end up in jail.
And end up in legal trouble.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks so much. We appreciate that. We appreciate you watching as well. We're back next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics, and we hope to see you then. Take care.